Welcome back to the Foundation in C# course. We're currently in Module 2, and this lesson we're going to cover more loops, in this case, for each loops. This is my favorite type of loop. And you'll see why in just a minute. So let's go right to the code and get started so you can see just how awesome these are. So File, New Project, Console Application, Console UI, and this is Module 2. Lesson 11. And we'll say that this is the console.readline at the very end. Now let's set up something to loop over. So let's create a list, because I like the list best. So lists of string, and we'll just keep doing what we've been doing. And this may feel repetitive, but what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to focus you on the new syntax you're learning, not on other stuff. And so if I do different things every time, you're focused on, well, what that different thing is and how it works. This way, we've done first name lists a number of times. And what it allows you to do is get past the idea of the setup to the actual usage of what we're learning. So first name.add, it also gets you used to doing these things over and over and over again. So first name.add, and you get to see my default naming scheme over and over and over again as well. These names are great because they're really short. And I'll do one more, just so we have a fourth. There we go. So now I have this list, and it's got 4 items in it. Now, remember we learned the for, which was, well, let's type it out real quick to see it. It's a little complicated. We're doing math here. We start at 0, we have less than, and the plus, and you can, like I said, I stressed, you have to be very careful to make sure these numbers are what they should be and for what you expect. Well, Microsoft said, yeah, we hear you. So instead, let's do a for each. Notice I can type F-O-R-E, and it gives me a for each, and that's a snippet. So I hit tab twice, and this looks different. So this is var item in collection. So this is describing the pattern here. So let me type it out, and then I'll explain it. So string name in, and I keep tabbing, and that allows me to move the different elements using the snippets syntax. That's really convenient. In first, I called it first name, not first names. That's bad on me, because first name is singular, and it's actually a list. That's not good, so I'm going to change it to first names. When I do that, it's going to break everything else, unless, while the cursor is still there, I can hit Control Dot to give me a quick menu here, and the menu says rename first name to first names. I click that, and it renames it everywhere. So now I've renamed it in every different spot, and I'm good to go again. So it really is a really helpful refactoring tool, which refactoring just means to redo something, but kind of keep the same inputs and outputs, but you're just reworking the code to be better. So I reworked it so that the first name is now first names, which is much more in line with our naming convention. So back to the for each. So I say for each string name in first names. Now for each kind of gives a clue as to what this is doing. It's going to say, you know what? You're not going to have to care about the math of how I loop through this array. All you have to care about is give me a set of data, in this case, first names, and I'm going to loop through each one. But instead of referencing it by that index, I'm going to put each value into a variable. In this case, we called it name. And the type we give it, we could say var, which, remember, var it takes on the type of whatever it's going to be. So in this case, it's going to be a string because this list has a set of strings in it. But I like to be explicit, especially when I'm working with newer developers. so they can see specifically what that var is going to be. So in this case, string name. It also allows you to make sure that your assumptions are correct. Because if you assume this is going to be an integer and you say var, you won't know until you try and use the integer and it crashes your application. But if you typed int, we just say, you know what? I want every one of them to run this code. That's it. I don't care about how you get it out. Behind the scenes is doing a for loop, but it figures out how to do the for loop for you and says, I'll take care of it. We're just going to go through one at a time. So how easy is this? Remember I showed you arrays, and I said you need to know arrays, but I really like the list. The list of T, so much easier. We just can't kind of add to it. You don't have to worry about the indexes and making sure you have enough allocated and all the rest. Well, the for each is just like that versus for. For each just says, you know what? Just go through the whole list. I don't have to care about how you're going through the whole list. Just do it. So putting list of T and for each together is just awesome. Because you don't have to worry about pretty much anything. You just say, fill that list up as many as you want. Loop through as many as there are. That's all you have to do. So that's for each. I mean, I can show you that in 5 minutes and hopefully you can grasp how to use it because that's all there is to it. For each. The type of your item in a list. So each individual item is a string. Therefore, that's a string. The name of the variable you're going to fill. And then your list or array or set. Now, just to kind of complete this picture a little bit, let's comment this out for a minute and let's do a dictionary. This one's a little bit different. So we're going to do the same dictionary as before, where we'll say important years equals new dictionary. So let's fill our important years up. So say add important year 1492. Columbus arrives in Central America. I'm just going to copy and paste just because it's a little easier, especially this length. 1969. Man walks on the moon. And then 1978. Tim is born. Okay, so there's our 3 items in our important years. So how do we do this with a for each? So for each, let's leave var for now, item in important years. And this is a trick. If you don't know the type, leave it as var and then mouse over it. And it says it's a struct. Well, we haven't covered structs yet. So the struct basically holds 2 different things in it. In this case, T key and T value. So let's leave it at var. So we can loop through more than just the simple list type. We can do arrays. We can do the dictionary type as well. The dictionary is a little trickier because it has two different values for one row, you could say, or one line. But it still works, especially if we use var to make our lives a little easier. So that's all there is to the for each loop. That brings us to our tip of the day, and that is use for each whenever possible for performing loops over lists. So if you have a list and you want to loop through it, if at all possible, use a for each because it's just so easy. Now there is one thing, the other thing is, not only is it easy, but it also protects you from having that off by one error, where you're not getting the first one, or you're not getting the last one. Now, the one kind of drawback of for each is it doesn't give you that counter. You didn't have that I to know the position. So if you really need that counter, you have to either do a for loop, which is probably more in line with what you should do, or you have a counter inside your for each loop where you just keep adding one to an int. Either one will work. All right, so that's our pro tip. Let's move on to our homework. Our homework is to ask the user for their first name and then continue asking for first names until there's no more. So we're going to say, what's your name? My name is Tim. And then it says, do you want to enter another name? Yes or no? We've done this before. So keep asking for first names until there's no more. Then loop through each name using the for each and tell them hello. So now you're storing these names in your list of string, not an array, a list of string. You're going to store these names, and then at the end, you'll do a for each and loop through all these names and say hello to each person. So hello, Tim, hello, Bob, hello, Sue, hello, Dan, and so on. So get that done. Make sure you don't move on until you can complete this homework. Once you complete the homework, move on to the next lesson.